It's great to have on Zoom with me here today, Leonie Freeman. Hi, Leonie.
Hi, great to be connected with you.
When we say change our thinking, change our lives, what do you think that means?
I think it's a really interesting and quite succinct quote, because at the end of the day, any change that we see, whether it's something we want to change a personal habit, whether we want to make a step and do a new business or change something in a bigger organization, it actually all starts with yourself.
Yeah.
And being open to what possibilities that change may create. And so I think it's really important that people don't necessarily always look outside and think the change has to be external. It's really about embracing it and understanding that the future is not preordained. Everybody has the opportunity to create their own. And so start with yourself first. I, like many others, I'm sure, I was encouraged to work hard, go to university and get a job. And so when I first said, after I'd come back from overseas, and I said to my dad, I want to have a go at working for myself. I'm going to have a go at being a consultant. You know, it was so outside of the family's understanding. And you know, I know that he used to send me job adverts just for, you know, for a while, just in case. And it wasn't that he didn't think I could do it, but it was just security was a big thing for them. And then again, when I bought, some years later, when I bought a rundown residential property management company, you know, I invested every dollar I owned into that company. I mean, that was frightening. But I knew that, you know, the bigger vision of where I was trying to go and what I was trying to achieve was so important. And so, yes, it very much comes to yourself and the stories that you tell yourself. When people look at the website realestate.co.nz today, they think it's really, really obvious. But when I first started talking about the concept back in 1995, people thought I was completely crazy. And they laughed at me and they ignored me, and they used to say, Leonie, no one will ever buy property this way. And one of the things I learned through that whole experience was that for me, I could see the future. It seemed so obvious about the impact of the internet and what it would do in terms of being able to find property to buy or rent. And yet most of the real estate industry was telling me, no, look, you're completely crazy. I'd almost given up on it. I'd come up with this idea. I talked and talked and talked, and people told me I was crazy. And after 5 months, I was actually about to give up. And I was going to move on to something else because I thought, oh, maybe I'm wrong, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I had actually made the decision that if nothing happened at the next meeting, I would move on to something else. And it just so happened that at the next meeting, I met with Peter Cook, who, interesting enough, is from Christchurch, who's a well-known realtor and past president of the Real Estate Institute. And Peter got the concept. Hallelujah. And so he became a very influential advocate. And then within 12 months of that meeting, we launched realens.co.nz in August 1996. And so what I realized was that it started with me, and I had to, despite all the doubts and the, you know, worrying about whether I was completely crazy or maybe I was wrong, but realizing that actually if you want to create change and in a wider perspective across a big industry like that, it does start with yourself. And every single day for quite a long time, I had to get up and tell the message until enough people got it. And we were able to eventually launch one of the first commercial websites in New Zealand. If I'm honest, I didn't even call myself an entrepreneur until I was probably in my mid-30s. I just didn't see myself as that way. And, you know, one of my first really visionary and entrepreneurial ventures, apart from going consulting in my own right, was the launch of realens.co.nz. And even back in 1995, I suppose at that stage, I believed, and I was a lot younger and far more naive and idealistic, I actually believed that everybody could see what I could see. And so I didn't see my skills as anything that special. And it was probably, you know, into my 30s that I realized that actually I do have some entrepreneurial skills. And I think that it just shows you it doesn't matter what your background or upbringing is. To me, it's more about an inquisitive, a continuous curiosity about the opportunities, and always looking to say, well, look, what could be done differently?
Have you got any go-tos that you know, resort to when it might be stressful, or you're launching a business, or you're even doing a big keynote, you know?
So I try to exercise regularly, sleep well, meditation, get my head in the right space. But one of the things for me I've found quite powerful apart from connected relationships and making sure there's, you know, a strong support network, is quotes. I've got a whole series of quotes. In fact, I've developed it over the years of my favorites. And what I have found is that at each pivot point or change, there's always been a quote that just speaks to my heart. And sometimes when I'm perhaps in some of those down times when you're trying to really create change and do something really innovative, which people don't often see, I find that really helps me as one of my tools going forward, because, you know, it's like Mahatma Gandhi's when he says, be the change that you want to see in the world, you know. So it's a reminder that if your purpose is right, sometimes it does take quite a long time for these changes to happen, and part of it is about perseverance. You know, and another classic I love is Steve Jobs, you know, here's to the crazy ones, because he says, you know, the crazy ones are the ones, if you believe they're crazy enough, they're the ones that can change the world. Yeah. And it's just a reminder that, that, you know, that real visionary thinking is important. And just because you might be the only one at the moment seeing it doesn't mean you're wrong. I've invested quite heavily into personal development things over the years, and a whole variety of stuff. So I've done things like Tony Robbins' Entrepreneur Success Program some years back. And so I would say I've experienced times where I've had some quite big shifts in my thinking around stories I might have told or stuff like that. But at the same time, at the end of the day, a lot of it comes back to creating habits, and habits is about continually doing this, you know, the key things you need to do every single day. And to me, that's about grit and resilience. So I think you need both. And so I'm not a procrastinator, but if you are a procrastinator, then to me, it's about saying, you know, what are you going to do to not do that for the next 30 days? And by that stage, you might have got yourself out of the habit, or whatever the measure might be.
What would be a middle of the dartboard recommendation for habit breaking, Leonie?
For me, it's about being really clear on what I'm trying to achieve and what the purpose of the outcome is. So what's the lever? You know, why is it important to me to change this particular habit? So, for example, one thing I've done recently, I've tried and tried. I like sports, and I've always done things like basketball and boxing and all that sort of stuff. But I've always known, you know, I should go to yoga because I need to get more flexible. And I've tried, but I've really, really struggled with it. So instead, what I've done is I get up every morning as part of my morning startup, and I do 10 or 15 minutes of stretching. And, you know, to me, that doesn't really interest me. It doesn't excite me that much. But I realise that, particularly as I'm getting a little bit older, the flexibility is quite important. And so that whole purpose thing to me is absolutely critical. And then making sure I've got some sort of accountability every day to ensure that I do it. So in terms of the stretching, it's part of my morning startup, and on my daily to-do list, it's something that I have to circle to say I've done it, sort of thing. And so I have to make sure I put it in place. And then on the other side, there's the occasional time where I might be traveling or I miss it for whatever reason. It's not to beat myself up, but just the next day carry on and do it. You know, sometimes when I'm speaking about this, I often say to people, try and understand your own thinking or fears around change and what's driving it. Is it sort of safety? Is it, you know, like you think it's really crazy, or is it just the fear of change or fear of failure? Get really clear first on your purpose. So I call that heart speak. So be very, very clear on your why, because all the challenges that then come from that, or the people that criticize or doubt, or your own stories that you tell yourself, if you can link back to your why, that can be the biggest driver. And then the second bit is to get people around you that have diverse opinions, but share your passion for whatever it is you're trying to do, because you do need some support. You know, it's hard to be a crazy person on your own. So, you know, build some strong networks of people who are passionate about change and improvement and innovation, and create some support networks. And to me, then it's just keep going and get excited.
In the next 1, 2, 3 years, where where and what's the picture for you?
So I'm going through a time of change, another period of change, which is always an interesting one. And on the housing front, I'd like to think that in the next 2 or 3 years, we've actually implemented the collective impact solution to actually solve the housing crisis. It will take probably 10 years to fully solve, but we need to take the steps to make sure we're heading in that direction. So that would be one of them. In terms of my speaking business, I have a real passion to share my message around business transformation and how to ignite innovation in organisations. So I want to build that. That is my way to serve and contribute to society. And then the last one to me is always around leadership and perhaps sharing stories and mentoring and coaching people so that they perhaps believe that they can do whatever it is that they set their mind to.
Thanks so much for your time today, Leonie.
No problem.
I really, really appreciate it. I'm sure viewers will take away heaps from that short interview.